welcome everybody to episode 46, season, I think 5 of the Unchained
Something like that.
Vodcast.
Something
We've
like
been
that.
doing this thing for a while. We've just taken a short couple month break to get revitalized, wait for some news, and get some new ideas for episodes. As you can see, we've also taken this time to update a few things. I've got a new, hopefully superior microphone. Got some background stuff going on. Brand has put together this awesome new overlay and intro video for us.
Yeah.
So,
And I have a new apartment
yeah.
With internet.
with internet.
That helps.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So we've updated a lot of things. Try to get to, I guess, podcast 2.0 sounding and looking slightly better, and just giving us a new start on things. I guess move into
Yeah.
season
We just
5.
didn't invest $7.5 million in it.
Not quite, but
That was all of it.
now that you mentioned it. Today we are talking about investments and development, specifically the news we just got about the $7.5 million investment. To put that into context, the original Kickstarter investment for Camelot Unchained was actually just over $2 million. And of course, on top of that, Mark Jacobs and other people had put in their own investment money into the company, but the original crowd-funded amount was only $2 million. The $7.5 million adds a pretty big chunk to the to the development. And for what that means, that's really what we're going to get into. But essentially, the game is secured well into the future. Before they always had funding, and they said that we've got funding. We're not in a bad place funding wise, but there's limping along for the next couple years, not able to really spend extra money on things. And then there's having extra money to get in new developers, hopefully some faster delivery, and all for the cost of what is supposedly a minor stake in the company, not a controlling share by any means. So, if we can go into this. Only 2 years till the game is out. Hopefully not quite.
Next year.
So the first thing that we
Hopefully.
really, I think, need to talk about when it comes to investment and money, obviously, is new hiring. One of the more interesting parts to me of this, because they did talk about different things they would do with the money, specifically hiring came up a lot.
Yes.
Hiring new engineers, new developers, and everything. One of the things that kept coming up that I thought would be interesting to talk about, because, or at least for me, and I'm sure for many other people, it comes up as a what does that even really mean type thing. They kept bringing up that they want a developer specifically for tools, a tool developer.
Yes.
And
Tool engineer.
we usually don't go over questions previous to doing this cast, but I will freely admit, before this one, I went, Brand, what does that even do? And he's like, they make tools. I'm like, I get that, but what does that mean?
It's in the name.
It's like, I understand what that
Describe
means.
a
And I
tool
don't
for me.
understand that other people don't understand what that means.
Like, I understand the concept of what a tool is, what it's supposed to do, but I'm like, get an example.
Yeah.
Like, what are some things they might make for the game development?
Well, a couple of people have already been working on tools development, and things they've already talked about, things we know about that already exist, are part of tools. And in this case, a tools developer is, for them, probably more of a person who looks at the pipeline process, everything it takes from getting characters modeled and made and art, and then getting them in the engine. And they look at that process and they come up with software tools to help speed that up.
Things like getting Ben's spreadsheet into the ability systems, basically.
They code the software needed to take data and apply it functionally to the game. And that could be for the game designer, such as in Ben's case, or it could be sound effects or VFX, things that Mike was working on VFX, so plugging those in to everything. Those are all the things needed to get that done, are tools, basically.
Yeah, that was obviously one of the first things I thought of was when they were doing the rehabilitation, and they said that they came up with some new tools, some new code that would allow them to put the abilities in and attach modules and everything. So I figured that
Yeah.
most likely counts. Um, and so, but that was what left me wondering was like, well, okay, so they've got that in there. What are the things that they could be working on that they still don't have tools for? I mean, they've been basically building this engine for the last like 4 years of our development time and money. What else do they need for tools at this point? Um,
Just lots of things. There are a lot of mechanics that they haven't even touched yet. That over the last couple of days we've heard that hasn't been a focus. Some high priority mechanics like res sickness or res in general, as well as possible healer vision. Any of those kind of things that we've heard about but haven't really seen. There's going to be a lot of tools needed for that, and we haven't seen all the newest asset creations going into the game either. A lot of new animations in the process of being built that even though they have a tool set to get that in with the individual animation parts for arms or lower body or upper body or head, I'm sure they're still working on tools to continue to efficiently get those into the game and assigned to wherever they need to be assigned to.
that was one thing I did think of is wondering if they might have something to do with developing tools that would help with the animation process, because that has seemed to be one of the greatest time sinks, at least that we know of, doing animations. Now, they did
Mhm.
mention hiring specifically a new animator, which sounds like a good idea because I know they've had.
Yeah.
It just seems like every update we're still working on animations.
Well, the problem is
It's
it
a lot.
was Andrew was doing that instead of doing other things,
Hmm.
um, which slowed things down also. Because they were splitting the animation between two
Yeah.
or three programmers, so it
Yeah.
slows down things a
Been
lot.
Scott and Sandra largely the two
Yeah,
primary animators. Andrew working with certain
the
effects and
integration.
animations and integrating, um, and now they're supposedly looking for another. I think they just got an animator
Yeah,
already over the last week, and now they're
yeah,
looking for another one as
another
well.
one. Mhm. The senior one, I think they're looking for,
Yeah.
because this one is just well, at least in the name, they just named it animator.
Mhm.
But now they're
Yeah,
looking for
on their
senior
website,
animators, I think.
one of the roles on their website for available positions is
Mhm.
a senior animator.
Yeah.
I know.
Now, another thing they really talked about seemed to be focusing on hiring that would kind of, in keeping with the animations as well, but for other roles, hiring people that would help other people focus on game development instead of other tasks. And by that, I mainly mean MJ, because they
Yes.
talked about a customer service rep and a
Yep,
part-time
I mean
finance
here.
person, which sounds to me like two things that
Mhm.
he was probably having to do
He
all the
was
time.
He was
he was the only
the only
person doing them.
he was the only CS rep
Yeah.
at the time, and he was the only one, especially since PayPal was the main mode of payment. He was the only one with the access to PayPal to process the refunds,
And that's why you see a
which
lot
was
of
taking
forum requests about,
yes,
hey, it's been 3 months since I
yeah,
processed this refund. I haven't gotten it yet.
yeah.
He's a
Can I
busy
have
man.
my money back?
Oh yes, and now he's making clothes also.
Yes. Couch covers.
Yes, couch covers.
So one thing I did want to ask is, and again, as always, these questions are always for Chad as well. Um, what are some other roles you think that they might be using money to hire for?
Well, more baseline programmers. They're looking, I believe the number's around 6 new additional regular programmers with specific
They're gonna almost
knowledge.
double their numbers, because they
Right.
were up until now there were 28 on the studios, and the number they gave was up to
40.
40.
They're looking
So that's
to be around
almost
40.
doubling their manpower and their programming power, which is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. And I know they specifically mentioned hiring somebody for Cube development as well, which
Yes.
particularly excites me. It's I have not been shy about it that I think Cube is one of the systems that has the greatest potential for making this an amazing game. Back when I actually had a fan site for the game before I decided that podcast is superior to the fan site in all ways, and no one followed the fan site anyway. I did a rather lengthy blog post on all the different reasons why I thought they needed to focus more development into Cube, and so I really would love to see them hire somebody that's spends like majority of their time really working on Cube, and especially getting the free building placement system down so that we don't have to use plots in game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming very soon.
The free building system, not so much probably. They unless there's a big shift in their development mentality because of the hiring, I still think they're gonna go for the plots, because let's be honest, it's much less of a headache than trying to let people build anywhere they want except on restricted areas. So the plots are, for me, actually a good thing, depending on how they do it. But
I do not want them in. To me, plots are like half-assing the system. Cube has potential to add so much strategic value to the gameplay.
Yes.
If we're able to build in most places and really choose where we want to build. But if we have to sit to plots that they put on the game, it's me, it's at that point you almost might as well not even have Cube.
Yeah.
Well, going with what you said, Kriss, I think it is really relevant, and it's probably actually going to be happening, that their game development mentality, I think, is in fact going to be changing with this new surplus of money and a new producer along the lines of new hires. They now have a new producer, I believe, for the Virginia office.
No, he's in
Is
Seattle.
it replacing?
He's replacing Brittany.
But that person now seems apparently really involved with things moving forward.
Yes, because they're waiting on him to announce the beta. I suspect he's a very experienced producer that has a lot of experience in the gaming industry, which is why they put a lot of faith on him,
right?
And wait on his feedback. I suspect they're not announcing the beta for that reason. He's probably taking a look at what is done, what they had planned, seeing basically doing an overview of the project, and telling them where, from an outside perspective, looking in, where they really are on the game.
Not only that, but is anybody coming new into a company, it would, for someone at that level, it would be pretty rough if he comes in and they're like, yeah, we could have waited like 2 weeks for you to get a handle on what we're doing here, but we decided we don't need your input. We're just going to decide when this thing's coming out, and you have to make that happen. That's not a great way to move forward when they have the option to say, we'll wait a couple weeks, and they can give us some feedback and have some input into what we tell people.
Yeah, Rhaegar, right now they're definitely keeping the two products separate, just because I don't think technically they're there yet to put the two together the way they want to.
They have tested the Cube system in the game environment.
I think there's still a lot of updates coming to Cube that they've only tested what is currently there, and it's going to change so much.
Because they've already said several times, and for months, if not years now, that Cube hasn't been updated. So Cube is, in fact, pretty outdated compared to their other projects. So right now, I don't want to go into too much details because it's mostly NDA, but it doesn't mesh very well right now in the game. It feels like an outside system being pasted in.
Yeah, honestly,
and that's probably why they now that they can hire and have people focus on Cube, that's probably why they wanted to be brought up to speed with the advances of their of the engine.
Yeah.
Honestly, the I still think, even though I want to see immense development into Cube, and I think it has great potential, I actually still feel like most of the like there should be some very limited ability to build in Cube live in the server. But for the most part, I really feel like for any large or significant constructions, most of that should be templated and just pasted into the game.
Yeah,
The way you
Swazi
could grab a template
actually
and go, I
talked
position
about
this
that.
here, and then it builds over time, and I have to defend it. Instead of I put
Yeah.
one block and then one block. Like I can never see how that's going to work for building a castle. You'd be killed before you get
Well,
halfway through a wall.
Yeah, that I think Swazi talked about it on the second stream on Thursday about Cube being the platform where you actually create your blueprints and then you can import them in the game, and the building is being done in the game, but the actual creation of the blueprint,
Exactly.
the designing part, the architecture part, to be done in Cube, because you can't spend the time, think about what you want to design, having the peace of mind of being able to have trial and error without being limited by your resources. So creating in Cube and then importing the blueprint and having it built in there in the game sounds to me like a better solution.
Yeah, I should say, just to clarify for some of the comments in chat, when I say no plots, I actually mean no developer placed plots. Obviously, I think they're going to have plots for players where like a player or a guild claims a plot and then you can build within there. What I want is for players to have the freedom to choose a plot, not necessarily anywhere they want, but most anywhere they want, and not have just, this is a square the developer has said someone can build right here, and this is the only place you're allowed to build. And then 2 miles that way, here's another plot where you're allowed to build a castle, and
I would be,
that's what I don't want.
if there is no plot, what I would prefer, actually, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's not the subject today, but I would prefer a cube allowance, a number of cubes, physical cubes allowance per player and per guild that can then combine into one, like a bank account. You have that much cube allowance in your account. You can combine it with other members of your guild to have more cube allowance, so you can create bigger structures. And you can earn more allowance like that through realm rewards. And then on the map, you have white zones. So basically zones where you can only those zones are building activated. Everywhere else, you can't build, like on water, for example, rather than on land, or like a hill that you can't build on, something like that.
Now, Brand, did you have something on Cube? Because I didn't want to spend the whole time talking about Cube.
Yeah,
I was just going to mention that you guys started talking about resources and crafting. I think that's another part of why Cube is so far behind, because it is so tied to crafting and resources, which we haven't really started to see take full shape yet.
No, we haven't.
Yeah,
once
more work on crafting.
I almost think that they're pushing the cube portion of it to help further the crafting portion of it sooner rather than later, because we're going to have to see crafting pretty early on in beta 1.
Yes.
Now, while we're talking, I wasn't going to bring this up till later, but while we're already on Cube, one thing they did mention, which somebody in chat had brought up, is virtual reality development for Cube.
The thing.
Yes.
The thing. This actually came
secret.
up in one of the articles. It actually came up in one of the articles on their websites. Not really one of the interviews until it was asked about. So, I don't know. What do you think? I'll save mine a minute. What do y'all think?
I was a fan of it when I found out about it, and I've known about it for a while.
Yes.
Couldn't say anything about it,
you just
but
like saying that. I know you.
Yes.
You kind of kept.
I like
smiling
repeating that.
I have a secret.
I
know a
secret.
I know
this one thing.
Wouldn't tell me.
We tried.
I have nothing against it. I think it's going to be really cool, especially since it seems like it's being focused entirely towards Cube, so you can be
Yeah, it is.
immersed in
It is.
building it.
There's no way to work in combat.
No.
Is it a bit of a play off of trending buzzwords in VR and the way things are going with virtual reality? Probably, but it's at least being considered not as this unique feature that they're trying to sell the game with, but more of a, this would be cool where we can do it.
For me, is I know George was working on that on his spare time, but it's, for me, VR is still way too gimmicky to really be worthwhile. It could be interesting for Cube. At the same time, from everything I've seen, I don't own a VR headset, but from everything I've seen of VR games, you combine that with the physics and the stability system of the buildings in Cube, and you'll never be able to build something that doesn't topple off, because you don't have the precision of movement in VR. It always seems so wonky to me.
I'm not sure why. I mean, you could fly
because,
you could fly in game and just let you fly around and
yes.
If it's limited to Cube, though, there's there's physics, but the air system and combat will be separated from.
Yeah, no.
Cube.
What I mean is, in Cube in game, you will have a physics system, but you have also what they call the stability system. Mm-hmm. If you build an L with a long platform and just one wall, your building is going to fall off on one side because it's not supported. If you, with the limitation in VR, in the movement you can do and the wonkiness of the control of, because what they've said on the stream is that they don't want the keyboard and mouse system in VR. You will handle your cubes with your hands. And it's not very precise in VR right now. The VR systems are to hold a virtual object and move it around in VR. For me, for everything I've seen, it seems very wonky. So,
to be fair, and at risk of saying a bit too much, neither is the current system with mouse and keyboard.
Yes, I agree with that.
I will say I am biased. I am a fan of VR. I haven't done much with it. I'm currently saving up for a VR headset. Before they made this announcement, I was saving up for one. So when they said this, I was like, yes. I don't think it's entirely a waste of time to develop for VR, because I kind of agree with Rhaegar. I think porting Cube, not the game itself, but Cube specifically into a VR platform would not necessarily be an immense work. I do think there will be some work in getting the controls right, things like that. But putting it, I mean, the game itself is already 3D. They just have to. I don't think the level of work they're going to have to do to port it into there is going to be immense, because, again, they're not making a whole VR game. They're just giving you a VR experience of something that already exists.
Yes.
Right.
Now, so they have to work on the UI, basically.
Yeah, and now one area, there's also an additional area where I feel like if they are successful in doing that with Cube, they could possibly do this in the game, which I think would be really awesome, is the safe cities. Because as a role player, if you tell me I can put on my Vive and go first person view into the capital city and walk around and role play with people on my computer, I am absolutely doing that. I'm just gonna sit. That's gonna be all day. Sitting there in the capital city going, this is amazing.
I'll be the buzzkill and say I doubt it's gonna ever happen.
It might. My discussion
not in the game. Not in the game. I
probably not.
Don't think so.
Definitely not first. And I know based off of my discussion with Mark regarding it that it was completely out of the question when it came to combat. It's possible for cities, and Rahalden, I really hope that's not the case, because that's just reminiscent of the EVE Online project trying to build their engine for Vampire the Masquerade and then completely trashing that game and using it instead for EVE Online.
You just hurt
Well, he
Vellic.
said Cube is their next project after CU, and that's like,
Yeah,
so they're
no.
building the technology for a future game, using it on this other game that exists already or is being in the
They
process.
could, though. I mean, sure, they
They
could.
could.
Well,
I don't think they're necessarily
yes, but
planning that, but they could.
Cube is, in my opinion, from everything they've said, Cube is not their next project. Cube is just they've. It's a tool, exactly. Their next project is using the engine they built to make another game.
Yeah, so they don't have to do it again.
Yes, and licensing the engine probably.
And
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I would agree with Rhaegar that I do think they've said before that they've kind of said before they didn't want to sell the engine. They want to license it to other people.
They don't.
They have to support it.
Not at first. They said not at first.
Consider it.
Well, I think they've bounced back and forth. Like, I think their older statement was kind of like they would maybe, and then more recently they've kind of said like maybe probably not. But anyway, Cube is something though that I kind of agree is a tool. Like they could probably port out Cube parts of their engine or something, and I'm not entirely sure. At the very least, they could certainly use it in other games that they develop on the. And so Cube, so like investing in VR and Cube may not just be an investment in this game. That could possibly be an investment for, because maybe they do want to do a VR game after this, and they could already have it in Cube, and maybe Cube part of that, and so on and so forth. It could happen. I don't know. I'm just saying things that they could do.
Thanatos says that we've kind of seen this before with Landmark and EQ Next, and yeah, a little bit, except that their development focus was entirely in Landmark.
Yeah, and not at all in EQ Next.
And not at all in the actual game, and this is the opposite of that.
EQ Next was never a game that was fully convinced.
No. Oh yeah, no.
I'm fully convinced they lied to us.
Yeah, they were doing Landmark, and that was it.
Yeah. Anyway, Cube VR, cool stuff. One other huge chunk of news that they mentioned: launch target 2019.
Yes.
Is that realistic?
I think it can be. And I know after the announcement, I was scrolling through the forums, and in the announcement thread, Mark clarified. No, it was the Eurogamer article.
Yeah, it's in the Eurogamer.
A couple days after they were aiming for a late.
It might be late, but they think they can hit 2019. Yes.
I think
I was hoping mid 2019.
It can be realistic. I think the idea of having a whole lot of extra investment money, kind of perhaps clouds the problem that I've seen talked about over the last couple of days, in that they've already struggled to find developers.
Yes.
Having money doesn't change that. It does allow them to maybe look in different areas, which could help, but I think they still have to tackle that problem before we can really see if that's realistic or not.
Well, MJ did say 2019 is going to be very dependent on how fast they can hire.
Yeah.
I suspect, considering what the gaming environment has been on the East Coast, that's more on the West Coast, actually. So I suspect that Seattle is going to outgrow Virginia by a lot. And that the main quote unquote studio is going to shift there, because they're still going to have trouble hiring for Fairfax. But possibly. At the same time, as Vellic said, there's been a lot of laying off. Even just yesterday, we had the news that half the team from Chronicles of Illyria got laid off.
That was a week ago that happened, but but Fairfax isn't. It's like right outside of DC, which is a very, very big area still. It could still. I can see it still managing there. It's not like in the middle of a wheat field in Virginia or something.
It's not in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with Kriss. I mean, not only have there been a lot of companies and a lot of layoffs and things on the West Coast, it does seem to be a more popular, perhaps,
closer to San Francisco.
I could see Seattle area. I definitely think they would want to avoid opening any other satellite.
No,
I don't
he
think
he
they
did
will.
say it's out of the question,
Yeah,
very explicitly, that
I think
there's no chance in the world.
I think the only reason they even have one is because of the fact they had trouble hiring people who were already out in the West Coast, because
Yes.
there's a lot of game development studios out here, especially in
Mhm.
Southern California, and they just weren't willing to make the move. So they opened something in the West Coast
There.
to allow them to grab some measure of people.
And the gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Oh,
I think the
2019.
wages were also not very attractive
Okay.
for developers when you have that many options in the area. So the fact that they couldn't pay as much as some of the studios was probably harming them also. So being able to offer more now is going to allow them to maybe hunt more skilled and senior programmers than they used to. But at the same time, going back to your question, I still think 2019 is doable, but it is going to be a hard target.
It always the beta goal, what their statements of Kickstarter
Mhm.
and my own, but also looking at other games, always seem perhaps their beta goal have about a year. So if we
Yes.
get beta in the next couple of months, then
You'll have
seems
that.
on track to 2019 at some point. That would be
Mhm.
at least plus years beta. And they
Which
did
seems
say that with the money, they I believe they said they want that outsource artwork. That's
Yes.
the thing they can do
Yep.
as well without having to hire on new people. They can just
That's
out.
the easiest thing for them to do, and then
Yes.
get that work back and integrate it properly.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, but they said that before they are able to outsource, they need to make sure everything is squared off in house, and
Mhm.
then when they have the pipelines ready to be able to bring in the outsourced material, then they will be able to outsource. So that's why they're right now heavily focusing on getting tools engineers.
yeah, and I think it's realistic. And Rhaegar brings up something that is relevant. That he doesn't think they'll have the same hard time that they had with the major delays. I don't think so either. They've had a very long string of productive work over the
Yes.
last half a year's worth of time or more. And it was really the rehabilitation and realizing that their pipeline was not producing what they had hoped for. And they seem to have fixed that. They've readjusted what they're trying to do and their vision
Yeah.
and how much they're trying to push. And I think with the right number of people, I don't foresee them running into too many further problems outside of maybe air.
Yes. The thing is, and again, that's something we can't exactly discuss because of NDA. But from what we've seen so far, there's still a lot of core mechanics and systems that are not in the build, or at least in the builds we've seen, that might be worked on. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that they're showing everything they have also, but from what I've been able to see, and in some way it hurts me to agree with some of the more outspoken people in the community,
No names.
but no names.
We all
But
know who he is.
It is true that it's not an unrealistic objective as some may have said, but to me, I know they will ramp up the production, and they will ramp up the implementation of things with the new hiring. But
I think
so
we're gonna see
it still
spikes.
is going to be a hard target to reach.
Yeah, there's still a lot of different things that um, there's still a lot of different things that need to be added. I mean, need
Yeah.
islands that move. talked about
Mhm.
having constant updates where environment
Crafting.
water can raise and cover things and fall and stuff. So there's a lot of different
Mhm.
things that they need to add in there that
Mhm.
aren't in there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think has contributed to the difficulty hiring has been those delays. Having delays and everything don't exactly imbue confidence into potential applicants. So they're like, why would I want to move to Fairfax for the company and their game is delayed like 3 years?
Yeah.
Which I can see that getting investors, getting $7.5 million more dollars, could possibly immensely help their recruitment, not just because of having more money, but because it shows them, okay, the investors clearly think they've got something and they've got plenty of money to go around. They're not going to get closed down next year. So if I apply there and I move there, there should be a job there for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think that could help. Let's see.
Yeah. That definitely established them as a stable studio, which will help the hiring rather than a small indie studio that is hoping to push out a game eventually. Well,
I can
now
see that.
they're a backed studio not by crowdfunding, but by an actual financing company, by actual investors, which brings them not just the money but the credibility of an actual financed and funded studio.
I mean, I was as someone who was
Non-refundable
recently
money.
as someone who was recently in the job market and really looking at applying somewhere and moving somewhere. If I went and I looked at a job that I thought there was a risk it might not last, they didn't have the funding for the position because I actually interviewed for one um, that that it actually stated that it was funded through the year, and I got in on the interview with them. I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean there's money for next year? Does that mean it's going to get refunded for next year? I mean, am I
Yeah.
going to move across country and then next year the job dies and I'm just stuck there?
Yeah.
Nobody wants
And
that. Um,
yeah, and
No.
yes, Rahalden, they're paying part of it in stock options, at least for the moment, for the next 6 months.
And there's still stock
Um,
available.
yeah, but at the same time, if you're not a studio they have faith in, you can pay with how much stock you want. They will not take the deal. So
well, and I don't think necessarily. I mean, saying that you're paying stocks is not necessarily saying that that's replacing part of their salary, though.
yeah,
That could be an additional incentive to get people in as
yeah.
well.
I think they were using it as a perk for the fact that they were not paying as high as some other studios, and instead you were
That,
getting stock options that might be worth a lot more later
yeah.
down the road.
I think he also implied some of their relative newer hirings within the last year
Hmm.
that they weren't able to come in at a pay level representative of someone who had been there for a while.
Hmm. Yeah,
And with this new investment, they wanted first and foremost
raise
to bring
money.
them up
Hmm.
to kind of being all equal level. So to reward the people who have stuck around and had faith in them who've been there for a while now.
Now,
Mm.
somebody else mentioned keywords that is big on mine, and I don't think we're gonna have great news, but and that is the topic of stretch goals. They've got tons of new money, tons of new crew
Mhm.
potentially coming on board. What does this
Mhm.
mean for health?
Uh,
Not a thing.
Nothing changes.
Yep.
I actually think that something did change with regards to that, because previously, I mean, they really hadn't been willing to talk about it lately for obvious reasons because the game's so delayed and everything. But going back 8 months, conversation was always stealthers are a stretch goal. We would like to get them in game, but we're not going to promise it. And when they announced this money, there very much seemed to be the tone of anything that's a stretch goal is not a goal now. Still a
Yeah,
stretch goal.
pretty much.
Any stretch goals that are on the website that have already been reached are
Will
intended
be
to be
there.
there for launch.
No,
Stealth is one of them.
unless they've been said in the stretch goal that they
Oh,
will
that
Be
could
a
be.
be an
extender
extender
goal.
pack.
Yeah. Which
If they're an
Stealthers
extender
and
pack like
Scouts-
the additional classes, they will most probably not be in the game at launch.
which
They want
Stealthers
to
and Scouts,
launch
as I
the
recall,
base
are
game. Yes. That's one of my because when they did the rehabilitation and they said they might give us a chance to add the other classes in the game at launch. Right now, I think they're focusing more on speed than anything. So they will push out the base game, probably with none of these stretch goals or extender packs. Well, none of these stretch goals that were not planned to be on at launch.
Yeah.
Everything that was promised to be on at launch will be there, but everything else will be, if it goes smoothly and they actually catch up some of the time and they can make it they can push that in with till I think MJ said we will be aiming for 2019 if late release. I think that publicly he said that. I think privately 2019 is their dead end goal. It's they want to launch by 2019.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to sacrifice any delays or any further time investment to any new things. I know there's actually going to be a stretch goal announcement over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the two remaining big ones. And the other one is the beta date announcement. I think the second one is something about the stretch goals or
it's the next big one is the tiers, the backing tiers.
Oh, that could be that's right.
Yeah, he said they're going to talk about the backing tiers and the rewards for the long-term backers, and probably the introduction of new tiers, moving from builder to citizen or something like that.
That's right.
But yeah,
but as far as stretch goals go, even if they get ahead by a large amount, I think that's just going to mean the game comes out sooner.
Yes,
and they're not going to spend any time, even if they get ahead making these new things. They're just going to release sooner.
Yeah, that's honestly more or less the same thing that the impression that I got from this latest announcement was, while they didn't say Stealthers not making it in for long, absolutely. That was the impression I got. Was it's not, instead of it being a thing that we would like to have them in for launch, it was more we're not even really going to try to get the base game with the base classes in. Everything we said is definitely going to be in for launch. That's our goal. Stealthers and everything else is more or less out. Which honestly, I mean, I can agree with some points. You know, Liliora, I think it was, had a very good point that Stealthers need a lot of testing. That's a whole new dynamic to the game, and a system that needs a lot of testing. My problem is kind of twofold. One, there are a lot of people that really wanted Stealthers, and they're gonna be pissed. The second one is actually that the lack of Stealthers really changes the game a lot, and I don't want to get into it too much, because really this is the topic of our next episode to some degree, which is going to be class counters, class archetypes, which ones counter each other. But kind of sneak peeking into that a bit, when you don't have Stealthers, sneak up behind and kill the healers that are supposed to be remarkably powerful as long as no one's hitting them, how do you balance the game for that? And then knowing that Stealthers are coming out eventually and going to be able to counter them, how do you then go into development going, we're not going to have them, so we're not going to have their main counter or one of their main counters, and so players are going to have to figure out what to deal with them now. And I mean, that just seems like combat would change so immensely not having them.
And you know, Ben is working so off the scene with all this stuff and balancing all of his spreadsheets. I know Zach is always joking about never getting to talk with him anymore. So busy. They may find months from now that things are not going to go well with that aspect of the game if they don't try to get some of these classes in sooner rather than later. And if you're pushing the game for a late 2019 launch, at what point do you start planning for that? When do you actually start testing it? And if you start testing it while we're still testing before the game comes out, why not just have it in there?
Yeah.
You know?
And I just checked, and on the stealth part, it doesn't look like there's anything saying extender pack rather than, because there are some that are said specifically extender pack, like
I do believe it
the
does say there.
the spirit classes.
I do believe on the website it says specifically that other classes are. It doesn't say an extender pack because
Hmm.
I think it's left a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not camouflage for archers are post-launch or if that's intended for pre-launch, because that's a part of the
I
stealth stretch goal, but it's also a part of the
I
core
can't
mechanic for
I can't
archers.
see them. Yeah, I can't see them delaying the camouflage for the archers when it's such a core system of the class. That would be weird, and that would be
I'm hopeful that will still make it in.
opposite to what they're promising, which is delivering a finished product. Archers without the camouflage in the way they work in CU would mean an unfinished class. So I don't know.
Rhaegar, yeah, I know he does more than that. I was just talking about that aspect. He's largely in charge and involved with that. Lily Aura, you're saying it's better to have the class in even if it's basic than add it in later.
Yes,
I think
I would say yes, if only for one specific reason: progression.
and that's something I planned on at least talking about in our next topic and how that works.
I don't know. Oh boy, they did state that these investors are getting a stake in the company. Investing money, they expect to get money back.
Yeah.
In the long run, they've just said that they don't have a controlling stake in the company as the control.
Yeah.
Kickstarter donation to money was donation to the game was only just over 2 million, but it was not the majority funds for the game. I mean, Mark Jacobs, I think, put in like
4 million
or something.
4 million, 4.2, something
and then
like
they had another couple of investors inside that.
Well, tennis, yeah, there will be flavor of the month, but in what Kriss was just talking about, there's a progression issue with releasing classes later in the game that really causes a whole other slew of issues. But
yes,
yeah.
And I don't know what the issue volume. It is. It does seem to be going in and out a little bit on my. I've got my volume. Mike's like right here. I mean, it's.
I can
see it on screen. It's literally right there.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
Drag it into my mouth hole. I can just talk like this the entire time, guys. What's up? Hang out right here with my
but yeah, to go back a bit to Old Boy
it's too late.
or Tantana's question, it's that they're not just getting a share of the company. He gave away some of his stocks to get the investors in, but the goal, it's, as he said in one of the streams, their goal is funding the game to make the stocks go up and being able to sell to make a profit. So they're not, they don't give a damn about the direction of the game as long as it launches and the stakes, the stock options go up. So, and he did say again, none of them are gamers. They've already funded Mythics to make the AOC. So there is a history between them, and I suspect that Mark made sure the contracts were airtight, so that he doesn't lose control. 6 months. Yeah. To make sure he doesn't lose control, like what happened with Mythics and with Warhammer Online. I think, I think he learned his lesson, and he's now made sure he keeps control of his game development. And while you can have a falling out with your family, it's still much less likely than outside investors. So having his sister as the second stakeholder is still quite a bit of an insurance.
That, and I don't think there's really any offer that they could make to people like us for investing that could come close to $7.5 million worth of increased revenue.
Well, they could sell castles.
I mean, they kickstarted with a third of that money, and some of that money, a lot of that money was refunded. That money has already been spent. I don't think there's much more they could offer to get another $7.5 million.
I know what it is. I've got it figured out. You gave me the idea, Kriss. They can have the game launch with naval combat, and they can sell ships. They could they could start off with little small, like 2-person ships that have like tiny little
like
ballista
the
on
robots,
them. And then later on they could sell these giant ships for like $200, $300, $400 a piece that have some cannons, and then eventually even bigger ships for like $2,000 a piece. They could just keep
like
rolling out ships. Keep rolling
the
out ships
for
like
1,000.
every couple of months. Every couple of months, just a new ship with different guns
No,
on it.
They don't. To be fair, they don't even need naval combat.
And people
They
can buy
have the
multiple
plot
ships.
system. You can only have a plot if you pay for the plot in real money.
And
you can only build if you buy your
fun of
plots.
Star Citizen in the slightest.
No.
If they did that, I would immediately ask for a refund.
And,
give me my money. I back Star Citizen. I would still be like, give me my money.
Yeah, and Lily, I don't think the majority of the people refunded, but it still is a pretty big chunk of money they refunded with the delays and everything.
Yeah.
I would suspect, I hope not, but I would suspect it might be at least a third, if not between a third and half of the backing they had that was refunded.
It's a large amount.
Yeah.
So, last thing I had for us for today is just kind of a general question. I like to roll this off with just kind of a base softball for us to relax from the discussions, and that is for this one. What would you like to see, or what would you like for this money to mean in terms of game development? What are you hoping is more secure in game development, for more secure to come out for long? Because
I would like to see a more regular beta opening. With the money, they now can have more server time. And they've already talked a lot about how it may not even be every week. And I think now they have the opportunity to get people in and really give the backers, because they're always talking about making it worth it for us having to wait, giving us a real good time in beta to test, and having them open, not every day. I don't like the whole every day for a 3-month thing, but at least every weekend for X amount of specific time. Once that's
especially
out.
if you do it in spring, you know, like it comes out every weekend for the next couple of weeks. Have fun, and then break to update the builds, and a couple of weeks of just and
I think
tennis.
I agree. Yes, but that's not on CSE. That's on testers. Limiting the tests to avoid testers burnout would in the long run harm CSE more than the testers, because the more tests you run, the more testing you have done and the more bugs you can find. So cutting back on testing, I'm not saying having it open 24/7, but the more testing sessions you have, the more bugs you're likely to find, and the more fine-tuning you're likely to get. So having, like, say, every weekend, or maybe a week every other week, things like that, would be more interesting to me, I think, in terms of testing purposes, than trying to limit it artificially to prevent testers from burning out.
What I would like is just consistency. Like, for instance, testing every weekend or for sprints of every 4 weekends and a break or
And
whatever.
not just opening the testing during office hours.
But not 24/7 during that weekend. I'm
Right.
not talking necessarily the whole weekend, just that testing happens that weekend and it happens at this time and this time and this time and that's
Mhm.
it. So okay, it's going to be open every weekend for 4 weeks, these times. Let's go.
Yeah.
So that there's consistency to that and I can know, okay, I can plan. This weekend I'm doing and I'm doing.
I think along with that, depending on how SNS goes and this campaign thing that they're doing to make beta testing more fun, if that actually has really good response from everyone, I'd like to see them work at trying to do more of that with other things that they're developing as the beta phases.
The scenarios, yeah.
I don't think they've updated the user. I look at them
Yeah.
occasionally. They're really been neglected.
No, they did until recently.
They do still
But
update them. It's
yeah.
just they leave stuff on there for so long.
Yes.
When it's like
Honestly,
like VFX,
they're
VFX has
user
been on there
stories
for ages.
were supposed to give more readability to the thing, making it easier to read through them. It just made it more confusing, in my opinion.
Well, I think the problem is for some of them, especially the beta ones,
Mhm.
the goals for beta 1, they've made the thing so all encompassing, like VFX, that we never see it update. It's been sitting on there for ages, and we're just like, when are you going to check that one off? Inventory. I
It's
remember they were
supposed to be
working on
monthly,
inventory 6 months ago. I think it's still not checked off on there because I guess there might be something they want to do to it. I don't know, but it's still on there and it still hasn't been checked. Okay.
Yeah.
I go check them occasionally, like, how close are we to beta? Nothing's been.
Short of testing, I think I want to see a lot of focus in the programmer world as much as I would love to be part of the art stuff going on. The company, I know that at the moment, they're not focusing on that. They have enough people to do what they are doing art-wise. So if they can focus on getting the core mechanics out, and if Mark can focus on design again and get other things fleshed out, getting all of that pushed forward quickly, I think will give us much more to testing it sooner, and then hopefully it's a game sooner. So I think that's what they're trying to do.
For me, for what I want to see from the funding, pipe dream wise, I really want stealth. That's my pipe dream wise. I really want stealth in there. Not even for stealth. I mean, I want stealthers. It's mainly for scouts. I want the enriched map experience we will get from scouts, and I want them.
Yes.
I know that doesn't seem very likely right now. So for me, the other thing I really want to see cemented in there is a good cube system with placements so that we can really decide, hey, I want to build on that mountain. Can I go build on that mountain? Yes, I can go build on that mountain, and that's awesome. Or maybe up the slope of the mountain or something, instead of having to go, oh, here's a flat land I can build on, or here's this place I've been given permission to build on by the developer. I really want to see a very well-designed plot system that allows the players a good degree of freedom.
So not a plot system.
A player-placed plot system, not a developer-placed plot.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anybody in chat have anything they really want to see secured? Kriss, what do you want? I know what it is.
Yeah, we all do.
Crafting. I seriously, it is.
It's already secure.
We joke about it. No, it's not even that. We joke about it, but crafting the whole BSC idea of the crafting system has been one of the big selling points of the game for a lot of people. With the money they had and what they've been saying about the development time, I suspect and I feared even before the announcement that crafting was one of the first systems that would get harmed from the lack of funds, because they would have to downsize on the BSC IDs. So having that influx of money I want to finally see crafting fleshed out and actually see the crafting system,
Yeah,
and
I
not
think
a dumbed down system. So that's one of the things, because in most MMOs it's the case. If they have to cut back on something, they do it on the crafting, and it
I don't
becomes
think
just a
that'll be the
gimmick.
case in this instance. I think Mark is predominantly the crafting developer, which is why you haven't seen anything, and hopefully these other hires will allow Mark to get back in.
They had I forgot her name, one
Christina?
Christina in Seattle that was helping him. Yeah,
But I think Mark is largely the designer of the crafting.
Graphic system. And I just think that I kind of agree. I think the impression we've gotten from them, and I tend to agree with this, is crafting is not necessary for beta. Basic
it
crafting
is.
is, but the basic crafting systems, how they work, getting gear built by players, is really not that essential for testing the core combat system in beta.
Yes, but that's not the point. That's not necessary, but that's a basic system that anybody, any programmer that is in the MMO industry can code, because it's in every single freaking game. You get gear, you take 4 materials, you put that in a container, you bang on it like for 3 seconds, and you have a piece of gear.
But you don't want
Every
that in
game,
this game. You
every
don't
game
want that
does that.
crappy system that
No,
every
that's
other
why.
game has.
That's why I
That's why he
think.
wants it to go.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to go into test sooner, because the extent of the crafting, the fact that it's going to be time gated, the fact that they promised that you will not have crafting bots, because it is going to be necessary to be a fully committed crafter to be efficient. All those things require testing and balancing, because if it takes 2 weeks to craft an epic piece of armor, half of the crafters that are interested in playing the game are going to go to another game.
Well, I agree with you, and if you'll let me finish, I agree with you that it does need testing, and of course it needs a consistent amount of testing. But the bulk of the game is not crafting. The bulk of the
No.
game is RVR. The RVR test has still not been tested and does not require crafting to be tested. So I can understand why the bulk of their focus has been on just getting a very basic crafting system. On that, I think that they have promised us a great deal with crafting, and I think that as Brand has said, Mark Jacobs himself is particularly invested in crafting and is really working on it. So what I was trying to get at is that's why I kind of agree with Brand that I've never really worried that crafting was going to go on the wayside. That was not, at least in my opinion, that was not something that I felt was going to be likely to be cut. I felt like they would probably cut other things before they reneged on crafting, because I mean that was one of the big promises from the beginning of Kickstarter. And if they came out with the game, I mean, I said that people were going to be kind of pissed off about them not coming out without stealthers. If they came out without crafting being a really well thought out and designed system, I think there's a good portion of the backers of the game that would absolutely bolt, and they would have very good reasons.
Oh, for me, that's pretty simple. If they dumb down the crafting system, I was out.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Exactly.
I think crafting is, and I was going to bring this up in ways they could use money outside of development to bring in people. Crafting is a development thing. I think if they focus on getting that out sooner, we'll see more people drawn back into the game who have left, as well as more people who haven't even really bothered to look at a whole lot until that was developed. We'll see them return. And I really think that their whole standpoint of not being too flavorful with their publicity and their videos and getting current work out to us is maybe a little wrong. I think they really should spend some of that money in making videos and doing things, getting out to get more people drawn in, because it's already a niche of a niche game and they really need population to make this work.
Yes,
that's true. I would say it's a delicate thing to balance, though, because there are a lot of games that spend so much time on drawing that people in, and how do you keep that hype train going for so long? I mean, even us. I mean, we run a video podcast.
Yes.
I had a fan site for a while. We operate what is I'm not sure because I don't know the other size of every guild, but I've looked at the size of many guilds. We may be the biggest guild, or at the very least, we're one of the biggest guilds in the game. We're following the game. I'm tired of waiting.
Yes.
I'm not
we
going
all are.
anywhere, but there are some weeks where I look at it and I'm like, oh god, another year. Like, seriously, come on. So how do you keep that hype train going? It's tough. It's not. It's definitely not a thing that they want to overdo. I do agree though that I would like to see some level of additional marketing and stuff. And I actually hope they will ramp that up a little bit with Beta 1 because, and since they've talked about us being able to live stream and stuff sometimes in Beta 1,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the goal because I think they want it. I think they're tired of putting videos out and then people going, "This looks stupid. This looks like garbage." They want to get it. I think that's part of the reason why they've been talking about VFX and animation so much because they want to get it looking rather pretty for Beta 1, even
Yes.
though a lot of us backers don't really care about that so much. They want it
Yes,
pretty
but
so
once
they can
the
finally go, "Here,
NDA
stream
goes
it,
down,
stream it," and people will stop saying our walking animation is stupid.
Yeah, it's tough for them. I know they want good feedback and not bad feedback, but at the same time, we want to see something, and we do see things every week. The newsletter has cool pictures. There have been some really cool animations. For like the book casting was really awesome. I think we just need something a little more substantial for a lot of the people who have been waiting and not been able to see what's in the IT.
And
right
I think it's good for us as backers too. If I can kind of divert from the topic a little bit, kind of going with what Liliora said and what I just said about sometimes it's just frustrating, waiting this long.
it is.
Especially for those of us that are invested. We're not the ones that post and then we come back 6 months later. Oh, the game's still in development. Oh well, and then we leave and come back.
Yeah, you forget about it for 6 months.
We're following it in a weekly, daily basis sometimes.
Oh, on a daily basis in my case.
Yeah. And this is why I actually do have a tendency to get frustrated by people who are regularly negative. It's not so much that I don't want negative opinions from people who are following the game and to give real hard criticism of the game. Those are necessary. But when people are consistently pretty negative and pointing out issues that they have, they do eventually start to get them to bother me because we are in this long slog together, and I feel like a large part of our goal and our need as a community is to keep each other up. We have to. That doesn't mean being just completely mindless fanboys and constantly going, the game is great. But I'm very careful about what I'm negative about because I don't want to drag other people down. If Lily Aura is having a bad week and going, God, I'm so sick of waiting for this game, I don't want to pop in here and just go spew out negative crap and then she's like, wow, I guess this is just terrible. Maybe I should just give up on waiting for this. I don't want to be the contributor. And I feel like there are some days when I need other people to help me keep hanging on and waiting.
Yes, definitely.
And so it's totally off topic, but that's kind of a thing that I think as a community, I think largely we've been very good. This is one of the better and most active communities that I've been a part of.
Especially pre-launch,
But we have to work at it.
And to be fair, I love the streams they do every week, and if I can, I will be there. But at the same time, I think it's a double-edged sword because having the same news every week, saying, "Oh yeah, we had a great, we did that, and that." Okay, what does it turns into? And then you have the Q&A that half the time frustrates people more than it actually hypes them or motivates them.
I don't usually sit through the whole Q&A anymore.
It's
the same questions over and over again.
It's the same questions over and over again, and the more people ask them and the more people don't get the answer they expect, the more frustrated they become. So I would like and not like that they kind of spread those streams. Make a short one, but make it, now that they have a CM, make it more as a presentation, more finished, less amateur, more professional, better graphics, shorter time, just an update, and not an hour and a half stream where basically we're rehashing the same thing we've said the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
So something shorter and more, not hype inducing, but more something a bit positive, where people don't just sit there and say, oh, that's the same thing they said last week.
I do agree. Like I agree with a lot of what you just. I don't know that I would want them to stop doing the, or at the very least, I would still want a regular schedule of Q&As, because I really like that Mark Jacobs comes and sits in front of the camera and talks to us, questions from us. I really like that, because
Yes, I do too.
it helps to reinforce that he gives a crap and isn't just
Yes.
doing whatever and ignoring us. So I think that's fantastic. But over the last, and when there's news, the weekly updates are great. But I totally agree that the last, outside of this last week, the last numerous updates we've gotten have all been, we're continuing to animate and we're continuing to do systems. And
Yeah,
I still watch them every week, but after several weeks of, we are still working on these things that are in progress, I kind of like listen a little bit, and I do other stuff on the computer, and I'm really not paying much attention because it's more of the same. And so
I think it's just a byproduct of how they format their news to us, which is an every week kind of thing. And making a game takes time, and some of those things that they do take a lot of time. So when you're there week after week after week, being there for the backers, sometimes that's all you have to update is we're still moving forward. We're still doing the things we were doing last week, because this thing is going to take months to do.
Yeah, that's where I said, instead of doing a top 10-ish, where it's sometimes 15 points, we're still working on those 15 points.
I like that they email it to
do a top 3 of what you just finished, rather than going on about the ongoing stuff. We know you're working on it. That's why we backed you. We have faith in you delivering on those. Tell us about what you finished, what you achieved, rather than what's a work in progress. So instead of a top 15, you do a top 3.
Has been expanded.
Yeah, it's been expanded. It started as a top 10.
Which I can understand. I mean, they want to show progress. They want to show that, yes, we're working.
But rather than showing a lot of small progress that in the long term will just frustrate people, show a smaller array of actual big progress. And that's something for me that would be perfectly suited for Brian to take care of.
Yeah,
because we've lived on our own since Genesee left without a CM. He's probably doing a lot more stuff than just CM work.
Probably.
Which
that's their thing. You have to, if you want to work there, you kind of have to fill multiple shifts.
Yes, but that was for a small budget studio. A CM for me right now, before they hire a CS person, the CM should take care of that. And then the CM should take care of the PR, because that's a full-time job. And CU needs it. CU needs somebody who's professional enough. Genesee had a good camera presence. Max does it reluctantly, but he still comes off well. But you need somebody who has a knowledge of presenting a short, concise presentation professionally. Where I love MJ, but he's as somebody who did a management school, being taught how to make a presentation, those moments are all I can see. I skip through what he says.
The Zoom thing fixed.
That's
all
too.
I want.
But I skip through all he says, and then all I remember is the and so if you have Brian doing the presentation, or somebody who's camera friendly and making a shorter one, and then MJ comes off and does the Q&A, I think it would be more dynamic and would frustrate people less. But we're diverging from the from the subject. But I think some of the money should be used in that part as PR.
I can't say because I want to end the like super long YouTube.
Yeah.
Too late, but I will add as my final thing to that. I guess I think what I would like to. First of all, we need to get new Brian on here. But anyway,
yes, we do.
But what I would like to see, or what I think would be good, is if they still had regularly scheduled presentations with MJ. His presentations don't really bother me. I don't mind him just sitting down and talking to him. But not necessarily, he doesn't, I don't think that necessarily has to be a weekly thing. I think that can be like a monthly, hey, this is what we did this month, ask me questions type of deal if they wanted to do that. And maybe,
they could do
maybe put some of this,
and
maybe put some of this on the new community manager to do something weekly. That doesn't necessarily even have to be an update. I mean, it could be an update. They could just say, hey, these are the highlights of the week or something. But to have some sort of weekly engagement to still be able to field the repetitive questions, things that aren't necessarily newly developed, but they are the common questions up. But more so, I think would be good to have a way for them to focus on engaging with us, or so on just updating us. I'm not really sure what that would look like or do, but I could see them doing something like that on a weekly basis would be probably more interesting to the established backers than just
as it was I can't remember. I missed it. Somebody in chat, I don't remember who said it. Those updates are also for the potential backers who know nothing of the game. But then the way they're framed right now is really not appealing to a new backer, because half of what you're talking about, they have no idea what it is, and half of the questions you're gonna ask in the chat are gonna be either skipped because they've been asked about 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, or just plainly the other people in the chat are going to tell you you're dumb because you're asking that question. Go read the website.
Yeah, I think that's why they've started refraining from asking questions irrelevant to the people doing the stream.
Yep.
So
real quick, obviously we're not going anywhere right this minute, but probably soon. But I do want to end the recording portion of this. So I do want to thank everybody for coming out and hanging out with our first episode of this new season. We'll, of course, do another episode in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And the next one is most likely, unless they drop some huge major news, next episode
like beta.
Like beta
is gonna be is gonna be class archetypes and their counters, talking about what classes counter what and how they might interact. Obviously, highly speculative, but we thought that would be a fun way to open up the season. Originally, we were doing that today, but obviously, big news came out, and we were like, we got to talk about that instead.
Yeah.
So that'll be in 2 weeks. So we'll see. Hopefully, most of you then.